Okay, so in the last video, we talked about some of the fundamentals of Vedanta. What is an object and what do you want when you pursue objects? Now, objects are anything that you can know or experience, and that includes anything external. So that's people, places, things, nature, your own body, and then anything internal, which is the contents of your mind. So thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, dreams. Anything that you can know or experience is an object. Now, why do you want objects? Do you want them for the sake of themselves? Do you want money for its own sake? Do you want a relationship for its own sake? Do you want name, fame, and recognition for its own sake? Do you want love? Do you want a particular state of mind for its own sake? The answer is no, because what you want when you want those objects is not the objects themselves, but the freedom from the feeling of limitation that you have when you recognize that you lack those things. So what happens when you get what you want, when you get the object that you want? When you get the object that you want, then that feeling of limitation goes away and you experience freedom, which translates to a feeling of happiness. So we're going to call this experience of freedom happiness, and we're going to ask, all right, well, if I'm chasing the objects for happiness, is the happiness actually in the object? And as we already saw, it isn't, because if the happiness was in the object, then it would give happiness to everybody, regardless of time, place, circumstance, or their personal feelings, opinions, or beliefs about that object. We can see that a relationship with one person can give you happiness, while at the same time that person that you have a relationship that gives you happiness makes someone else very unhappy. Or to extend that a little bit, you can say that an object like a person that you have a relationship can give you happiness initially, but later on can make you very unhappy. And then when you end that relationship with that person and they start a relationship with someone else, they make another person very happy. So we can see here that chasing the objects for the happiness isn't in the object itself. But the fact that we do experience happiness means that it has to be coming from somewhere. And this is the other fundamental of Vedanta that we covered, which is if objects cover the entire world, your own body, and your mind, and every part of your mind, then what does that leave? Okay, if we're saying happiness is coming from somewhere, but it's not coming from any of these things, which seems to be everything that we know, then what else is there? And the other category is the conscious subject, you. Okay, because to say that you know or experience objects, there has to be someone there to know those objects. Then if there's something that you know, it can't be you. Okay, you know another person. That person is not you, even though you know them. You know your own body. Your body isn't necessarily you just because you know it. You know your own mind. Your mind isn't you because you know it. So what we're saying then is that this feeling of happiness, which is an appreciation of your own nature being freedom, okay, is actually coming from you. You are the source of that feeling because your nature is freedom. Okay, this is the contention of Vedanta. It may not seem like it to you at this point. You don't have to believe it at this point. You will get the logical tools to prove this later on, but for now we're just going to present that and say, all right, Vedanta says that, hey, the happiness is coming from you, and it's because freedom is actually your nature. So, we have these pursuits of objects which we lumped into artha, kama, and dharma. All right? Now there's a fourth pursuit. And the fourth pursuit is, once you realize, hey, the happiness isn't in the object itself. Okay, and what I want from these objects really is freedom. Okay, so if it's not coming from the objects, and freedom is supposed to be my nature, then why don't I pursue the freedom directly by understanding what I really am? Okay? Now we call this the pursuit of moksha. Moksha means freedom. And using the word pursuit, it makes it sound like you're chasing something. You're doing something to get something. So that naturally begs the question, what can you do to get yourself? You know, is there an action that can be done to get what you already have? It doesn't really make a lot of sense, does it? If you're running around the house in the morning and you're looking for your car keys frantically, you're looking in the closet, you're looking in the cupboard, you're looking in the bathroom, you're looking in the bedroom, you're looking underneath the bed, you're looking for your keys all over the place, and then suddenly your spouse walks into the room and they say, oh, they're in your pocket. I saw you put them in there. And you reach down and, oh, lo and behold, your keys are right there in your pocket. This is a good illustration because in that case, right, did you get what you were looking for by doing an action? The answer is no. You already had what you were looking for. All that was required in that situation was knowledge, understanding. Or you could look at it in the negative term or the negative connotation and say that you needed to remove the ignorance of the fact that you already had what you wanted. Okay? So we already said then that Vedanta is a means to self-knowledge. Okay? And what we're saying here is that freedom is a matter of understanding that you're already free. But this runs contrary to popular belief or opinion, especially in spiritual circles, because there's a lot of different paths and practices that are prescribed for getting freedom, getting some kind of experience of limitlessness and fullness, bliss. But is that really going to solve the problem? You know, and this question is crucial to the pursuit of moksha. It's a perennial question, one that's been discussed in spiritual circles for a very long time. And of course, Vedanta says, all right, well, we're talking about knowledge here, not a particular action. But it's a persistent doubt. So let's analyze this whole thing about action a little bit further. Now, what we're saying is that we want a limitless freedom, because no one's really happy with temporary freedom. And that's obvious, because whenever you get what you want, after a while, when you want something else, you immediately start doing actions to get that thing because your happiness has gone away. Or if a situation comes up that takes your happiness from you, maybe an uncomfortable situation at work or with a loved one, you do whatever you can at that moment to immediately get rid of that situation because you want your happiness back. You know, temporary, partial happiness is not acceptable to anybody. So then, if that's the case, is it even possible to get permanent happiness from an action? It really runs contrary to logic to say that that is possible, because every action that's done, the results are always impermanent. They're always temporary. And you can see that just from looking at your own life. I mean, examine your life and see if there's anything that you've ever done that has had a permanent consequence, a permanent result, and you'll see that there isn't. Everything's bound by time in this world. If you do a lot of hard work to get a particular achievement, eventually the feeling of happiness from getting that achievement wears off. And then you have to work hard to achieve something else. Or maybe what you work to get goes away. You know, you work hard to get a beautiful brand new home, and then over time the house slowly, breaks down and isn't beautiful and new anymore, and you have to do some work on it to get your happiness back, or you have to sell it and buy a new house, etc. Anything that you own, it's subject to, anything that you do action to get to own is subject to time. So it's only temporary. And really, when you look at it this way, you can see that the individual themselves, okay, this body and mind that is doing these actions is not limitless. This person only has a limited amount of desire, a limited amount of strength and power, a limited amount of intelligence. And so, does it make sense then to say that a limited person with limited resources is going to be able to do an action that's going to have a limitless result? And the answer is no. It just isn't going to work. I use some examples about worldly things, like maybe getting a house or some other kind of possession. Some people think maybe that it's a different scenario when you get into the spiritual world. You think, well, I'm going to do a particular kinds of practices or actions to get some kind of limitless freedom through a spiritual experience. But unfortunately, the logic applies here, because spiritual experiences are a part of the world as much as your house or your car or your spouse. So any spiritual experience that you can produce through action will ultimately be limited. And for those of you out there who have had spiritual experiences, epiphanies or samadhis, I'm sure you'll be able to concur with this, that anytime that you've had any of those kind of experiences, even if they last for days or weeks or months, they inevitably end, and you're forced to go back and try to do more actions to get that experience back. So unfortunately, though, it's not going to work, because the nature of the individual doing those actions is limited and therefore can't create a limitless result. So hopefully that clears up the whole issue of action and knowledge, or knowledge and experience. This is a really, really important one. Even more so important than what we've previously talked about, because if this issue can't be clear, then it makes it almost impossible to continue on with the study of Vedanta, because you may be still stuck seeking a particular kind of experience that is going to equal freedom, but it just won't add up. What we're interested here in Vedanta is knowledge, meaning understanding clearly that you are the limitless freedom that you already seek. Okay? Now, that being said, if you can get on board with that logic, you'll have to say, okay, well, fair enough. How do I get to this understanding? How do I know? And the answer is that what we're talking about here is not an object. We've said that there's the subject and there's the object. The object covers everything that you can see, smell, taste, touch, hear. Any of those kind of things are covered under objects, but you, the subject, are not available for objectification because you are the one that knows all of the objects. So then, what? Your typical means of knowing things are the five senses that allow you to taste, touch, etc. Okay, you use your senses to gain knowledge of objects, and you use your mind to gain inferential knowledge of objects. You use your mind to make determinations between different courses of actions and gain knowledge in that way. But those aren't going to work in the pursuit of freedom because you are that freedom and you are not an object of the mind or the senses. So that makes it kind of seem dire because you think, well, that's the only way I know how to get things, is through action and through my mind and senses. So what's the deal? It seems like here that, action has no role in this thing and that possibly I am non-existent because I can't be seen or heard or thought of. Well, that sounds all very confusing. So what do you have to say about that? Okay. And the answer is that action definitely plays a role in preparing you for the understanding. And I will talk about this a lot more in future videos, but I want to address this doubt up front, just right now, to head it off at the pass, to say that, look, all of your spiritual practices and everything like that are perfectly relevant and valid, okay? And we will talk more about how those prepare you for knowledge later. They just don't give you the knowledge themselves, okay? And I will explain that more. And secondly, you are not non-existent. Saying that you can't be thought of by the mind or you can't be sensed by the senses does make people sometimes think that perhaps this self, this true nature, doesn't exist, but it definitely does. And you don't have to take that on my word, because as we unfold this teaching further, then it will give you the tools to see and understand how the self, what you really are, actually does exist, and really, in truth, is the only thing that exists. So we'll put those two doubts aside for the moment and go back to the original premise, which was saying, if I can't see or taste or touch or think of the subject itself, then how am I going to know it? Because those are the only means to know things that I think I have available. So what's required here is another means. And being smart as you are, I'm sure that you know what I'm going to say. That means is Vedanta. As we said before, Vedanta is a means to self-knowledge, okay? Now, what does Vedanta do? Does it give you the self? Does it produce the self? Or does it prove that the self exists? No. Vedanta just takes the logic of your everyday experience, and using that helps you to see what the self is and to clear up any erroneous notions about it. Okay, so Vedanta just uses the logic of your everyday experience to reveal the self that already is what it is and is already present. Okay? A story that Vedanta uses oftentimes to illustrate this point is the 10th man story. Okay, so in this story, there's 10 people that set out on a spiritual pilgrimage. And in the process, they get to this raging river. And if they want to get where they're going to have to just go ahead and try to cross. So all these guys get into the river and they struggle across to the other side of the bank. Now, once they get there, the leader of the group thinks, hey, you know, that was pretty dangerous. Better make sure that everybody's here. So he tells everybody to line up, and then he counts them. Okay, so he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He recounts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And suddenly he panics. And the other people ask him, well, what's the matter? And he says, there's only 9 people. One of us must have gotten lost in the river. And everyone frantically runs around, and they can't find the 9th. They can't find the 10th man, and they just start to panic, and then they cry, and they're all lamenting there together about the loss of their friend, when a little old man approaches, and he asks the leader of the group, hey, what's the problem? And he said, we've lost somebody. There was 10 of us, but now there's only 9. And of course, the little old man smiles a little bit, chuckles to himself. He says, don't worry about it. I'll produce the 10th man. And they said, really? Well, that's great. Okay, where is he? What do we do? And he said, no. He said, just do what you did before. Just go ahead and line up there in the line, okay? And this time, you, the leader, why don't you get in the line too, okay? And so the leader's standing all the way at the end of the line, and the old man counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay? And then the leader is pretty embarrassed at this point, realizes that, hey, I am the 10th man that I was seeking. Okay? So you can see here that this wasn't a matter of action, because the old man, by showing the leader that he was the 10th man, didn't make the leader into the 10th man. He already was the 10th man. What was required was for him to use words to remove the leader's ignorance of the fact of him already being what he was seeking. Okay? So this also kind of illustrates what Vedanta does. Okay, Vedanta isn't turning you into the self. It's not giving you the self. It's not linking you up with the self. Vedanta is a means that helps to remove ignorance of the fact that you are the self and that you are already free. And so in the next video, we're going to talk about where Vedanta comes from. Where does this means of knowledge come from? Who did it come from, if from anybody? And how did it develop? All of those things we'll cover in the next video.